Islam, Islam. Peace, everyone. I pray that all is well. So, we're back on it with our book series. This will be book section 5, Developmental Psychology of the Black Child, by Amos Wilson. And the chapter is The Black Child, the Role of Play in Development. All right. So let's get to it. Play is such a universal phenomenon among children until one is forced to assume that it stems from some intrinsic, innate need and serves some vital human function in children other than just that of leisure time, activity of little real value to the child or society. It apparently plays a part in the child's future development. Play provides an opportunity for the child to pursue its own inclinations in a relatively self-determined way and also provides the opportunity for the child to express, develop, and evaluate his capacities, potentials, etc. Not ordinarily expressed or explored. It is a child's way of dealing with reality, learning various ways of perceiving it, discovering its organization, determining his relationship with it, and learning to master it in himself in the process. In play, the child may freely explore reality to accept it or reject it, to escape or distort it, to suit his own interests, needs, wishes, and desires. Freud, and if you know what they deem Freud to be, in majority of the psychology programs, they say he's the father of psychology, which is not true at all, as we know. Freud assumed that play was important to the child's emotional and social development, and saw it as a means by which the child tests reality, learns mastery of the environment, and as a means of developing fantasy and imagination. For Freud, play was principally an outlet for ideas and emotional needs unfettered by social restrictions and punishments. In play, the child can assume various roles related to his or her family, community, environment, or related to his fantasies and creative imagination. By assuming the roles of adults through observation, imitation, and practice, the child begins to understand the world of adults and begins to identify with that world. It is through these means that the child begins to understand the role of his parents, group play in the world, and begins to get some vague idea of the role he is expected to play, some idea of the social standing of his family, ethnic group, etc., with which he identifies. So a lot of downloads or uploads is coming from the play area. That's why it's pivotal as parents that you get your children out and be out and let them explore. You get out there and explore with them. Go down slides with them. Push them on swings, hop on swings with them. Go on different trails with them. Let them interact with different children and watch. And it'll help. It will be help you to learn from the other children how they interact. Like a lot of times, and let your child fall. Excuse me. Let your child fall every now and then, not in a extreme way, but while he's doing he or her is doing their own thing, let them explore that and let them make the mistakes. A lot of times, a lot of parents will be right there, catch them when they fall and always picking them up and not really letting them explore. Um, it's good, to guide your children, but they have to let them evolve on their own and them playing with different children and using their imagination. That's as what Amos Wilson is saying. That's crucial in their development. Um, and play if he wishes or is encouraged to do so. The child can reject these roles and expectations and explore by imaginative means ways of overcoming the limitations. Like we was at the park, I believe that was Monday, and no, actually that was Thursday. Yeah, it was Thursday, and another younger melanated um, youngin, young boy, young male, had a soccer ball, he came up to my son and, kicked the ball to him. And my son was like, no, I don't want to play right now. And then, he grabbed a stick and wanted to do, um, we do like, Star Wars or Swords. I mean, he wanted to do that with me instead. And which is, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Some children don't necessarily want to play at the time. He played with that same child earlier on the actual playground. But it's good for them to have a mind of their own and not just, you know, always be influenced by other children to do what they want to do. I mean, you got to be able to say no in life as you become an adult. In fact, as parents, we need to be more susceptible to children expressing no. Maybe not in something that we're trying to get them to do as far as behaviorally or hygiene and things like that. But as far as the decision making of the type of activities they would like to do, or even some certain foods that they might not like, um, give them that breathing room to say no because you suppress those no's, and as you become an adult, um, even speaking from experience, you might find some difficulty of just saying no at times. It's just two letters. It's easy to say, but we tend to take other people's feelings in consideration and things like that before we do it. But you're good.
Are you live?
Yeah, I can mute it. I'm not sure if you all are familiar. My love just came and informed me that in Cleveland, Ohio, a woman stuffed two of her children into a suitcase, and she is on the run. Well, I believe she's on the run, or her bond is $2 million, something like that. I think yeah, bond's $2 million, but she shouldn't even have one bond. But again, the timing that we're reading this and we hear stories like that is it's wow. It takes two parents to have a child. So I mean, it, it takes two to raise a child as well, or children as well. May those babies rest in peace, rise in power. But man, mind control is everything. Don't have children prematurely. If you're not spiritually and emotionally stable, yes, we are. Everybody knows financially you got to be stable, but that's kind of like that. That's a given. That should be known. But more importantly, emotionally spiritually. Those are crucial because then you know if you might be in a state of what society might consider poverty, you always know that you can rise above your current circumstances. So, uh, let's get back to it though. The ways chosen, if they become a part of the child's basic personality structure, lead to healthy social adjustment or social maladjustment. Erickson, expanding Freud's views, sees play as important to development of the ego, particularly in its effort to integrate social realities with the child's own intrinsic self. Through play, the child learns and develops the adaptational tools to facilitate its coping with the world. For Erickson, play facilitates the child's development ability to cope and adapt to the demands of the external reality. For Piaget, play facilitates the child's intellectual and thought development. By means of play, the child adapts himself to reality by acting out past and present experiences and thereby changing his perceptions and conceptions of his world. Altogether, the views of Freud, Erickson, and Piaget point to the fact that play provides the child with essential opportunities for learning and for healing, for healthy psychosocial development. It makes vital contributions to the child's development that cannot be assumed by other activities. Consequently, play deprivation, the duration, quality, and quantity of it, will significantly influence the cognitive, psychological, and social development of the child. An interaction with a rich environment, i.e., an environment which gives the child's imagination ample exercise, range, and flexibility, an environment which is relatively psychologically and physically unrestricted, and allows the child's imagination to become a principal problem solving creative tool, adds significantly to his future characteristic adult, personal, and cognitive style. Example, the flexibility of thought, approaches, initiative, creativeness, lack of fear of new ideas, willingness to experiment, etc. Through participation in group names and sports, the child establishes social relationships and learns social norms, rules, and expectations of how to get along with others. It's here that the child develops a sense of limits, fair play, self control, honesty, how to take defeat, and how to fight against overwhelming odds and overcome them by using legitimate rules laid down by himself and others. Thus, group play serves a very important function in the child's moral development in that he learns to be responsive to peer group control, to heed instruction, to become one with others and working toward a socially acceptable goal. A child who is severely restricting his play activity with other children and adults is quite likely to suffer from personal and social handicaps as an adult. There are a number of different forms of child's play which varies according to the child's chronological, physical, social, mental, and emotional development. The forms we are concerned with here are the forms which most clearly hinder or facilitate his future personal and social adjustment. In this regard, we mentioned two other forms of preschool play that are important to the child's development: fantasizing and constructive. Freud saw child's play as an outcome of the child's fantasies, guided by his emotional needs. To a certain extent, that this is true. Daydreaming and fantasizing are forms of thinking and mental play. In fantasy and daydreams, the child assumes roles and does things not permitted or they cannot be fitted and can become a serious hindrance to social adjustment if they become the principal means of dealing with problems facing the individual. At age 5 or 6, the child begins to construct objects and things according to the preconceived plans and patterns. Provided the right materials are available, the child can have optimal opportunity to develop his creative and constructive abilities. Constructive play is important to the child's creative abilities and to the development of achievement motivation. Children who possess the creative potential but who lack the relevant materials may suffer dissatisfaction and stunting of their creative and motivational growth. They may also lose or not properly develop the sense of initiative and feelings of satisfaction that can be derived from engaging in constructive activities and completing challenging tasks. The child's life is not all playful physical activity. In the society, a good deal of the child's time may be spent reading, looking through picture books, playing various sit down games, playing with various toys, and enjoying various spectator events such as TV, movies, listening to the radio. Besides these activities, the child likes to be read to or told stories to. All of these activities influences the child's behavior and development in numerous and complex ways. How much time the child spends in the various types of play activities are a function of socioeconomic, social cultural factors, as well as his own personal inclination and the number of play activities available to him. Social class, to a degree, determines what games will catch a growing child's fancy, as well as what types of play activities will generally not be available to him. It's well known that social class influences the kind of books the child reads, what he listens to on the radio, looks at on TV, sees in the movies or theater, the type of organization he joins or helps form. Not only the quality of such activities are to a degree socioeconomically and social culturally determined, but so in the quantity of such activities determined by these factors. For instance, lower class children engage in less cultural activities, organized group activities, community supported activities such as music, art, dramatics, boys or girls clubs, scouting, etc., than their middle class counterparts. The lower class child will generally have less space to play and fewer toys and games to play with. Toys, in many instances, serve as a child's bridge to reality. They provide him with replicas of the adult world, and he will only one day be a part of it and allow him to be introduced to that world on his own terms, at his own pace, to get to know its interrelations and prepare to take part in it. The absence of toys may reduce the child's imaginative, cognitive, creative possibilities. A lack of basic construction materials such as blocks, sand, hammer, nails, etc., may reduce the child's chances to engage in constructive play. A well selected array of various toys will be quite adequate to satisfy the young child's short attention span and his need for variety. The situation is seldom fulfilled in the lower classes. The middle class child is more likely to be exposed to age graded toys, construct units, toys which are designed to make strong demands on the child's intellect, such as puzzles of various types, art and drawing toys, chemistry sets, modeling toys, and toys requiring a certain amount of technical facilities such as telescopes, microscopes, scientific sets, electronic sets. In this class category, the child is exposed to more games with which he can share with the adults, such as Scrabble, Monopoly, etc. Middle class child's play activities are therefore more likely to contain more elements of adaptive reality than that of a lower class child. And again, I mean, this can be perspective as well because, I mean, hey, even growing up, you know, in the projects or hood areas, as a youngin, we had board games, Monopoly, Operation. You had girl cousins that might have had Candyland. So we still have those. Obviously, playing outside with others, right? And some of us participate in sports. But I will say the encouragement outside of school to read is is a big difference. Um, and then the type of sports organizations you're a part of, which can lead to networking around certain individuals. So yes, the major sports is a significant difference. And then also we tend to rely on sports as a means to an end as opposed to extracting the principles from it. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, what it is at this point. Um, our children aren't necessarily repeating those same steps there. Take more of a fluent approach, even though we might not be in a mansion, at the time. Um, we do not wish to leave the impression here that the middle class child does not play hopscotch, tag, roughhouse, stickball, etc., just as does his lower class counterpart. I mean, I don't really, not mainly lower class, middle class, upper class children, period, don't really play outside as much as they used to anyway because of most everybody's addicted to the phones and the social media. Um, the games is still prevalent. So in a sense, I mean, everyone has some sort of a handicap. I mean, you literally have teachers that are quitting schools because of these issues that are occurring, and you have the Chat GPTs and the likes, to where teaching is not necessarily teaching anymore. So I mean, it's an epidemic, yeah, but it's more so on a larger scale today as opposed to what Amos Wilson was talking about in the 70s. Um, for in our culture, all classes of children play many games that fit no class distinction. However, there's a variety of games available, the relative amounts of time allowed to certain games and play activities, the motivation behind such activities that set the classes apart, which I agree. Many of the childhood activities of the middle class serve as traditional transitional activities. Activities are continuous with the class lifestyle than is the case with the lower class child. For instance, engage in certain hobbies, becoming interested in certain activities such as dramatics, spectator sports, etc., can serve as transitional means by which the child can smoothly enter into the adult world of work and leisure time activities that have positive value for the community. Not only do they play activities, the play activities reflect the child's social status, but also his intellectual orientation. What activities are engaged in, and to what extent they are engaged in, and what objects are required to meet his needs during his leisure time differs according to the child's mental age. A normal or bright child shows a marked preference for play materials that lead to constructive play: clay, scissors, paint, blocks, with which he makes relatively complex designs, crayons for original drawings. Being read to, particularly from more advanced books which provide information, is one of the main pleasures of the bright child. Older bright children tend to involve themselves in more solitary and less socially active play activities, and to less involves themselves less in vigorous physical play activities than children of average intelligence. The brighter child shows significantly less interest in games and sports than his less gifted counterpart, but they do show more interest in intellectual games and games that place some challenging demands of their intelligence or basic skills. At every level, every age level, highly intelligent children spend more time reading and show broader reading ranges and interests than a child of average intelligence. They also differ in their reading preferences. Gifted children enjoy reading dictionaries, atlases, encyclopedia, books on science, history, and travel, biographies, folk tales, informational fiction, poetry, and dramatic works. They dislike fairy tales and show relatively little interest in emotional fiction. They prefer detective stories to crude adventure and mystery, and show an interest in romance even before the age of 10. The differences which were listed by Herlock are also paralleled by similar differences regarding other leisure time activity between the bright child and the average child. For example, bright children show preferences for movies, TV, and radio programs markedly different from those of average intelligence. We must not overlook the fact that there is a reciprocal relationship between the influence the child's intellectual orientation has on his leisure time activities and the influence these activities have on the intellectual development and orientation of the child. These types of activities will make the child brighter. Reading of comics. Though comics appear to play a less important role in child development today than in the past, we think they are prevalent enough to warrant a brief examination. Comics are cartoon stories in which the story element is less important than the pictures. Their appeal is principally emotional. The comics present a vivid and realistic picture of contemporary American life. Characters coming from every walk of life reflect the cultural patterns of acceptance and rejection regarding ethnic groups. Comic can serve as a first step to more serious reading. The child usually begins seriously reading the newspaper as a result of his earlier interest in comic strips. His daily reading of the comics establishes a basis for the daily reading of the paper as a whole. Sex and intelligence differences found in other areas also prevail here. For instance, Boys and girls show different comic tastes. More comics and fewer books are read by slow learners. Slow learners read different types of comics than do their more advanced counterparts. The child's interest in comics often is coincidental with the comic hero worshiping stage in its development, particularly during late childhood. Boys tend to identify with comic book heroes and are mainly interested in subject, action, and the plot that elevate masculinity, aggressive mastery of dangerous situations. Those comics which emphasize crime and violence, sports, and athletics seem to be most attractive to boys. The interests of girls generally appear to be greater interest in women, animal comics, and less interest in adventure, mystery, and thrillers than boys. Herlock, while admitting that not all children read comics for the same reason, did identify certain universal trends among childhood comic readers. Quite frequently, the child identifies with the characters which may be used as a means of solving emotional problems and the release of frustrations. The emotional nature of comics allow for a bit of catharsis and comic relief for the child. The plot of comics usually contain a simple moral lesson which the child may accept. The characters in the comics may come to represent certain facets of the child's personality and what he desires to be. The characters do things that the characters do things that child himself would like to do, and they are brave, strong, and beautiful, with an unfailing ability to master difficulties. Herlock goes on to list a number of arguments in favor of the positive value of comics. The comics constitute a kind of modern folklore. The comics apply to children of limited reading ability, or reading experiences which is thoroughly enjoyable. They may be used to motivate the child in development of his reading skill. They stimulate the child to read further and may break down his resistance to reading if the materials is presented as entertainment. If children actually read the text of the comics, they will be introduced to a wide vocabulary, including words which they repeatedly encounter in other reading. The comics offer an excellent technique for propaganda, especially anti-prejudice propaganda. They serve as effective methods of simplified teaching. They meet children's needs for overcoming in imagination some of the limitation of their age and ability and for obtaining a sense of adventure denied them in real life. To normal children, the comics offer the mental catharsis which Aristotle claimed for the drama. Thus, the readers are released from feelings of inadequacy and insecurity and from fear of aggression toward or from others. They give the child pleasure by offering him a chance for identification. Normal aggressive reaction find release in fantasy stimulated by comic books. Through identification with the characters in the comics, the child is able to adjust himself better to life. More important than the comics themselves is what the child brings to the comic book reading situation and what he takes away from it. The child's personality, social, cultural, family background will interact with the comic material and determine its ultimate effects. The discriminative child does not allow the comics to dominate or distort his sense of reality or proportions. He is able to cull the negative aspects of the comics and assimilate their positive aspects. Movies. The effects that we listed concerning the comics on the child's mind are amplified greatly by the movies. In a sense, movies are comics strips come to life. Therefore, their effects, though very similar in their essential nature to the comics, are by far more influential. Of crucial importance here, as in the comics, in evaluating the influence movies have on the personality of the child, is whether the child identifies with one or more of the characters on the screen and with what type of character he identifies, as well as what needs the character vicariously satisfies in the child. The characters with which the child identifies become the vehicle for the expression of the child's needs, wishes, and desires, and the child vicariously shares character's world, his experiences, defeats, and triumphs. For the child who closely identifies with his favorite character, life may be for him an imitation of the movies. Thus, the child of aggressive temperament or inclination who closely identifies with an aggressive movie character is more likely to act out his aggression or aggressive feelings as a result of this identification process. The aggressive subjugation of groups and character types with which the child does not identify or does not like will permit cathartic release for repressed aggressive feelings and against those groups or character types. The sex, age, and race of the character and whether the character's actions are relevant to his needs, aspirations, etc., are of critical importance in determining the child's identification process and its direction. Similarities of the character's age, sex, race, etc., to the child's own physical and psychological characteristics will more likely positively influence identification with the character on the child's part. However, under special conditions, the child may identify with characters who distinctly differ from him in race, age, sex, etc. This situation is more likely to occur when the child's own ethnic, social, cultural background are sources of self hatred. The movie served a knowledge function, as do the comics. The child assimilates, acts out, and practices what he sees and learns from the motives through dramatic play with his peer group. Through remembering and rehearsing in his mind the action of his favorite characters and the unfolding of the filmed events by acting out the roles and ideas of the characters, the child learns new modes of thought perception and behavior, or his current modes of behavior, perceptions, and thought might be reinforced. This may not be advantageous in that child's current behavior may be socially dysfunctional. Of course, as with the comics, the child is not passively influenced by what he sees. What he brings out of the movie experience depends largely on what he brings in. The child brings to the movie certain needs, unique experiential background, which functions as filters through which certain elements will not influence him in one way or another, and other elements will not influence him at all. All in all, the child will interpret and react to the movies in terms of what he thinks of himself and what he thinks others think of him and expect of him, what his needs are, how his family and social cultural background, and how stereotyped the various roles displayed on the screen. Television. Much of what we've said about movies also holds true for TV. Again, it is what the child brings to the set that largely determines its influence on him. The well adjusted child will not be harmfully influenced by TV. Children whose environment and personality orientation predispose them towards social and personal maladjustment are more likely to be adversely influenced by TV. To a significant extent, it is not what is seen on the TV screen that adversely affects children, but the disproportionate amount of time allotted to watching that is harmful. Overindulgence in TV watching may leave little time for development of personal and social potentials, the development of good study and work habits, reading skills, psycho, psychosocially realistic, relevant attitudes and beliefs. For the socially and personally predisposed child, a constant television diet of crime, terror, and cruelty will in time blunt the child's sensitivities. He will consider antisocial and destructive behavior almost normal. Furthermore, repeated exposure to crime and violence will eventually blunt the child's sensitivity to human suffering. TV is not all bad like movies, and even so, more so, it can serve as a means by which the child gains knowledge, is introduced to new worlds and ideas, etc. It's not a question of whether the child should not watch TV, but of balancing TV watching with other important activities. With increasing age, the child spends a substantial portion of his time listening to the radio as a constant source of music fulfills a function largely unfulfilled by TV or movies. However, in its potential to adversely affect good adjustment, study habits, work habits, etc., can be as effective in some cases, even so more so as TV or films. The constant diet of music and messages radio instill in the minds of its young listeners by their repetitive nature can work against the best interest of the child. The hypnotic rhythms and romantic, erotic lyrics of the music broadcasted by rock stations, if not listened discriminately by the child, can become sources of addiction and escapism. Play activity in the black child. The general nature of the child's play activities reflect the general nature of the geophysical, psychosocial, and political, economical environment in which it takes place. This is true for the black child. The three variables in which we use to define character of a black psychosocial existence in general can be seen operating in the play activities of the black child. Schizoid play and his dramatic and limitational play where he imagines himself the embodiment of some legendary cultural folk, comic book, TV, or movie hero, play during which the modes of behavior of these heroes and figures are imitated. The child tends to identify with the hero or figure copy. He tends to at times lose his own identity and merge totally with the hero. He is imitating to such a degree that he becomes one with the figure imitated. He literally becomes dressed in the skin of his hero and takes on his hero's mannerisms, attitudes, and values. And that is very fascinating that as we're young, we automatically gravitate towards the hero because they do a great job um, with propping up the hero, making him seem like the virtuous individual. Yet, as you get older, a lot of times behind that hero persona, the hero is actually the villain. You think about it, a lot of times the hero really be the villain, and the villains really be the hero. But still, and yet, it's good for the children, psyche to want to strive for righteousness, but just use discernment as a parent when guiding them to, and also, drop those little seeds in their subconscious to let them know the qualities of a true hero, or what true virtue is. All right. Heroes don't necessarily just go along to get along. That's not the actual hero. But heroes do what's necessary to accomplish certain tasks. All right, so just keep that in mind. Temporarily, he is the heroes, the persons, and he imitates and acts in their world of action. One of the results of such play behaviors is the portions of imitated behavior and values, attitudes, and standards they may imply may become a permanent part of the child's personality and may influence his own behavior, values, attitudes, and standards in both conscious and unconscious ways. Since the cultural heroes, figures in their worlds they act in America are virtually all white, it means that when the American black child imitates, identifies them, and interjects the behavior, values, attitudes, etc., they imply to the degree that such interjected behavior, values, attitudes, etc., do not fit within his own psychosocial reality and contains elements which degrade his own physical, cultural, ethnic self. His play activities are schizoid in nature. The black child whose imitative play is peopled by white heroes and figures imagines himself white during such play. And again, since we're talking about upbringing, a lot of that goes into the background. And that's one of those things I was saying, drop those subconscious seeds in there to let child know that although this is what the hero looks like, it doesn't mean that you can't be a hero because you have the different skin complexion. All right. So you just keep, that's why it takes, it takes a village, really. I don't think we really grasp the concept of parenthood like to the full extent, because like we know society doesn't care. The fact that daycare starts at 6 weeks, that's a society that wants to feed on your children. That society don't truly care about your children. Don't worry about that. We'll watch them. We'll hand your children over to strangers that you don't know, that they don't know. Even though the mother carried that child for 9 months in the womb, don't worry. 6 weeks later, she can get back to work. What? 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 6 weeks back to work? What are you talking about? Honestly, I mean, childbirth is so crucial that once a mother have a child, that should be like everything should be paid for until a child is pretty much an adult, like automatically. But of course, as a man, that's what we're for. We have more stamina, so we're able to help out, provide, so she can pretty much focus her attention on that child. And when it's time for us to step in, we step in and do our part. But if we wanted, but then again, it's about capitalism. So now you do things like that, then you destroy the mental health industry, right? Yeah, yeah, and you destroy the daycare industry. You destroy Planned Parenthood. Um, you destroy all these industries, the medical field. with the birth control, because you want to cap the amount of children you can have, although the birth control has all type of horrible effects that it does to the woman. And I mean, I mean, again, it's a system designed to break you. So to combat that, you have to remain steadfast and not be broken. That's the only way. That's why it's I mean, it should be mandatory to work it out between parents. However, life happens. You know, tables turn, bridges burn. We live and we learn. Right? All right, where were we? No, we went that far ahead. Thus, in early childhood, the black child begins to identify with white and imitates whites. It is the white heroes and figures which populate the black child's mind during imitative play, which are powerful, invincible, masterful, smart, etc. Commensurate black heroes and figures are absent. In this child's mind, the attributes of his white imaginal heroes and figures may become attributes of whites in general and not the attributes of black heroes and figures, which are absent from his imagination. And this is where fathers are crucial as well. And there's no father in the home. Speaking of, so-called black children, and all the heroes you see on TV don't look like you, why wouldn't you gravitate towards that? Obviously. If nothing around you is even remotely close to reflecting that in a form of manhood, people that look like you. So again, another one of those designs, but yet as fathers, we gotta do better with vetting the women we choose to have children with, and know the bigger picture of, working it out. Even if you're not necessarily with the woman, it's mandatory that you remain in that child's life. And you have to keep a mutual relationship with her as well. Y'all have a child, you have a bond for life together. So I mean, the disrespect and the disregard, even the hate it's irrelevant. It can only lead to your detriment. Which is why, even though it's unconstitutional, it's criminal, but the child support industry is just raking up funds for no reason. It's and I trust me, I get it. It is not easy at all, being a father and whether you're married on paper or not, it doesn't really matter, because the relationship is the relationship. Your emotions, the differences in lifestyle adjustments you have to make. Just because you walk down the aisle at some church or went to the courthouse, that's not a determining factor that you're going to stay together forever. That's, if anything, if that was the case, divorce wouldn't exist. So like, the easiest thing to do, they say, is to get a divorce. Or you say, well, if you don't get married, the person, they're just gonna walk away. Well, at least you're not dragging your children through the court. You're not going to the different courts or family court, letting a judge who don't know your child determine how much you get to see your child. Or this is just unnecessarily, if I had those people in your business in which they didn't help you create the child, They didn't help you pay any bills, anything that has to do with, you know, the woman or the child. So it's like, eh, it's more for social validation, really, bro. It's simple, bro. It's truly simple. I'm not saying like don't get married, you know, by the state or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But once you start looking down on others, or you say, well, if you got married before you have children, then you would work out. Huh. How? How does? Where's the logic behind it? What evidence do you have? How do you? The, so once you get married by the state, does that mean that you're actually majority of people are going to honor those vows that they made? In fact, if it's so legit, again, like I go back to, why don't they stop divorce from existing? Once you're married, okay, there is no divorce. That would be truly a way for people to remain together, to actually live out the vows. Are you talking about paying some grant, some money, depending on if you have assets together or not? It's people are literally damn near dying from going to court from being married. Men are suffering all over the world because they say you don't know your wife until you stand across from her in the courtroom going through divorce. Then more than likely you got to take care of all her fees for the or if for the representation she gets if she can't afford it. It's just, I mean, it's more about the individuals than the children in those situations. Because if you were about the children wholeheartedly, then you would suck it up. I don't care what nobody said. There's not one woman in the world that's horrible to where you couldn't embrace the suffering with her as opposed to embracing the suffering of being in prison. Which one would you rather do? Would you rather suffer with a woman or suffer in prison? And it's the woman is obviously the better choice from that scenario. So why not look at it like that in your mind? Say, okay, well, I decided to bring children into this world with this woman. So I have to make sure that I'm accountable and in those children's life and help that woman out as much as I can, as long as it ain't no, you know, nothing too crazy and don't get too disrespectful from her end. But 99% of the problems in this society is solved with finance. You know, like seriously, you telling me a, a, a woman that had your children, she's so awful, but yet you can't throw her no bread to shut her up or make her be cool. You tell me you helping her out financially, she just gonna still hate you and do all this other stuff because y'all ain't together. Even though you're there 1,000% for the child, you helping her out, it's gonna be issue. Nah, bro. That's the case. That woman, if that's the case, that woman wouldn't. She won't be work. She won't work a job because that would be an issue. She'd be so upset that the guy she had a child with left her. That money wouldn't suffice her bitterness. A lot of things can be solved with finance. And then we know that it's not really, it's an illusion. It's not really money, what the real money is, gold and silver and things like that. But majority of people don't know that. But again, and the only reason why I say you embrace it suffering because I mean, desire to live is a desire to suffer. You're going to suffer in some way. So either suffer the pain of discipline or you suffer the pain of disappointment and regret. Oh, I wish I would have stayed with that man. Oh, I wish I would have stayed with that woman. Like, or we should have raised our children. Like, right? You're going to pay regardless. Like, again, if it's just you can't tolerate it in no way, shape, or form at all, then adjust accordingly. But most of the time, you get your bread up, and you'll see a lot of difference and how things are. Like, yeah. So even if the black child rejects the use of white heroes and figures in his imaginal and imitative play due to the fact that such play is disapproved by peers and adults, the absence of comparable black heroes and figures, or the imitation of and identification with socially dysfunctional or low-level black figures in his imitative play may lead to results similar to the ones we listed above. In addition, the rejecting black child may suffer poverty of imagination and imitation and thus may fail to develop an intellectual creative personality and social potentials, and fail to interject the positive behaviors, values, attitudes, and standards that may come from imaginal and imitative play, people, even by white heroes and figures. When we speak of the poverty of imagination, we're not implying an imagination poverty-stricken in its quantitative aspects. We're implying an imagination that lacks in its qualitative aspects. A breadth and depth, a richness of flexibility, which will become the foundation of a well-adjusted personality and creative intellect. The rejecting type of child's imagination is probably more prevalent in the black lower classes. Overall, one could wager that the split in the black personality begins in the play of black children. Frustrated play. If the black and white cultures were in effect one, colorless or truly integrated, in the schizoid play of the black child would be of no moment. No, and again, this is from 1975, so it's a little bit. It's obviously different, but even then, it's a choice to participate in that ideology. Like the whole the crayon games, like, and because we've known the construct of this casteism or classism, called race. We've always known that as a people. Like people were all aware of that, but socially, it's more acceptable to live out playing the crayon games. But yeah, if you truly like remove yourself from all that and your children from all that, don't call yourself black. Just call yourself American. You don't want to say Moorish American. I mean, just call yourself American. If you know about the Moorish history and how the Moors, ruled Spain for over 800 years, the only way that the European was able to be dominated and ruled was by the Moors, was practicing the ways of Islam. Like, why wouldn't you want to be? Why wouldn't you want to be that? And not even to necessarily like, hey, bow down to me type thing. Not even it's the mindset. Though the mindset of those Moors, no, it's not even a question. Like, hold on. They were fully aware of who they are. They truly knew thyself. So on. if we're here to experience and learn thyself, and you see people that have done it, and here today we're going through an ideology, or I mean, not even an ideology, but what's happened, what's been happening on the lands of North America, what's colonialism and occupation via Spanish Inquisition hegemony. If you see a way to combat that, and I mean, those are literally your ancestors. I'm speaking to Moors. Um, why not be that? And yeah, and Hebrew, your Hebrews and Moors as well. So it's like, what's the Muslims? You know what I mean? What's the issue? Muslim, whatever you want to say, all the same thing. So that combats that. Not everyone is an American, and see, again, I mean, and we're just reading this, and it's based in 1975, so obviously we can't go back. But I'm just saying that the awareness has been here, and I'm going through this to see ways to combat us from taking on these egregores or thought forms that led to our demise. And it's like it has been possible. Like I'm just not accepting any of it anymore. Like once I became aware to see that, like, okay, that's what they were telling me in biology with the Punnett square, right? Dominant genes give birth to recessive genes, right? Or give birth to dominant genes, but recessive genes can only come from dominant genes. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. The dominant will outweigh the recessive gene. The dominant predates the recessive gene. The dominant gene would be the original gene. Big B, little b, big A, little a. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's wild. And it's not even like an egoic mind type situation. Egoic mind, but it's just like it is what it is. Who, who were the original people of the earth? Not even. I mean, it's just wood is brown a lot of times, most of the times, depending on what wood. Yeah, I mean, real wood. So it's like it's not a conspiracy. It just is, or at least it's given off the color brown. Our brain is interpreting it that way. But yeah,
News.
Thus, in early childhood, the black child begins to identify with and imitate whites.
Wait, what are you reading to me?
It is the white heroes and figures which populate the black child's mind during imitative play, which are powerful, invincible, masterful, smart, etc. Commensurate black heroes and figures are absent. In this child's mind, the attributes of his white imaginal heroes and figures may become attributes of whites in general, not the attributes of black heroes and figures, which are absent from his imagination. Under influence of American racist culture, the black child's imaginal and imitative play may surreptitiously lay the foundation for his own growing feelings of inferiority, his own self hatred, and rejection of his people. It may lead to his frustrated attempts to identify himself as white or deny his blackness. We think Figure 1 in Chapter 3 attests to this situation. In light of our previous discussion, we think that the black middle class child or the black child coming from families operating on middle class value behavioral orientations. Even if the black child rejects the use of white heroes and figures in his imaginal and imitative play due to the fact that such play is disapproved by peers and adults, the absence of comparable black heroes and figures or the imitation of and identification with socially dysfunctional or low-level black figures in his imitative play may lead to results similar to the ones we listed above. In addition, the rejecting black child may suffer a poverty of imagination and imitation, and thus may fail to develop the intellectual, creative, personality, and social potentials, and fail to interject the positive behaviors, values, attitudes, and standards that may come from imaginal and imitative play, people even by white Negroes and figures. Okay, so all right, so I read that already, but I just want to go back over that because again, that superhero got to be that father, got to be that superhero. The black child early begins to realize that the heroic and imitatable images with which crowd his imagination are not members of his ethnic group, and that such images of his ethnic group are not projected. If he does not wish to imitate white figures and yet no suitable substitutes among his own people are available, his play is likely to be frustrating from an imaginal point of view, unfulfilling. Black child's play, which fully accepts white images for identificative and imitative purposes, or such play which rejects such images in the absence of viable black substitutes, leads to fantasy and imagination, which are often dysfunctional for further positive personal growth and development. In the sense that materialistic and positive imaginational objects necessary to serve as a bridge for the smooth crossing over from his world to that of adults are absent or sparse. The black child's play is also frustrated, i.e., it is deflected from what should be its natural goals of reality testing, broad environmental mastery, ego strengthening, integrating of the self with social reality, the facilitation of intellectual and thought development. Restricted play. Through using his play to master his immediate environment and to adapt to that environment, the black child adjusts to a social reality that is very often personally and socially dysfunctional. The restricted black lifestyle, especially of the black urban ghetto, when imitated by and identified with by black children during their play activities, lays the basis for later personal social adjustment problems in a world dominated by white middle class values, standards, etc., managed by the members of the some class. Now, there are exceptions to the rule, however, majority of the time, just thinking about the people that I grew up shooting cap guns with, or, playing cops and robbers and things like that. That's what it led to in later adulthood. Testing those waters, going, to jails, prisons, things like that, because of certain crimes being committed. Now, Some of them have fathers, but meaning in like around, but not really a strong enough influence to combat those. And then a lot of those individuals didn't have fathers at all. So obviously that, I mean, around at all, everyone has a father, obviously, but fathers wasn't around at all. Besides maybe early on, which became detrimental as well. So we think a lot of these things are harmless play, but I mean, it's just showing the psychology of that. You know, again, there's exceptions to the rule, but we don't. The exceptions don't necessarily count. The rule would count. The Grand Theft Autos and all the other things like that. So it's definitely unfortunate. Restricted black child's play is discontinuous with the broader society, and therefore does not adequately prepare him to deal with that society officially. The overall pattern of familial and societal relation organization serves as models during much of the child's imitational and dramatic play. If these models are negative, confused, maladaptive, so will the child's play, which is built around it. Family and community confusion, disorganization, which is so characteristic of much of black life, that children's imitational activities modeled on such confusion and disorganization lead to later maladaptive behavior. When one observes black children playing in the urban ghetto, it seems to contain remarkably few elements which one would regard as imitation of family relations. And then there's also a lot of, in the so-called black community, mainly the ones that wasn't involved in that type of play, which is because of, sports. Some type of athletic, whether it's foot racing, obviously the sports, or, tag, I mean, even hide and seek, which then became a little, you know, even I participated as well, but it became a little more than hide and seek. So it's just like, yeah, the only thing that's truly promoted seriously is really the only thing that's taken seriously. But the trouble still exists, and that's sports. But yeah, it's very unfortunate. Wow. Mother-father relations seem not to be imitated to any great degree, because then being around certain children that play house, you know, because they had mothers and fathers in the home. So, and then some of them, we didn't play house. We didn't, you know, see mothers and, well, couples in the home. So didn't necessarily include certain parent in that aspect of play. Though this may be due to the absence of space and toys which allow such behavior to take place undisturbed. It may also be equally likely the absence of fathers, the emotionally charged nature of the home environment, family role confusion, the absence of identifiable mother or father occupational roles that characterize so much of black family life may discourage black children's imitation of family relations as a means of avoiding the anxiety and confusion such imitation may engender. Consequently, urban black child's play seems to be centered around strictly physical activities such as running, playing ball, cycle riding, skipping, etc. While these types of play activities assumes a greater part of the average child's play, regardless of race, it seems to take a far greater part of the black child's play than is healthy for all its around development. This almost total involvement with hedonistic physical play leaves little time for the child to practice the assuming of various social roles, to reflect on social emotional problems, to develop strategies and abilities important for efficient function in areas of life other than physical pleasure and exercise, reasoning skills, reading skills, etc. In a sense, one could say that the play of the black urban ghetto child is escapist in nature, i.e., in the sense that it does not allow the child to playfully deal with problems that will confront him in later stages of maturation, particularly during his school years and later in adult life. His play takes him away from his problems. We think the escapist tendencies of black children's play is reflected in the part of the escapist pursuit of physical pleasure in the face of family and community problems which need solving of a very large segment of the black adult population, especially black adult males. Play activities in the black child. As we imitated earlier in this chapter, the child's toys and games in many instances serves as bridges to adult reality. Serves as bridges to adult reality. Logically, then, the paucity or absence of facilitating toys and games makes it a little more difficult the child's entry into that reality. But this may not be significantly detrimental to the child's development or other compensating means usually are available in whatever deficit which may accrue from the absence or paucity of toys and games in childhood can be rather easily overcome in adulthood. Quite often, it is not the absence of toys or games which sets the black child apart, but its interest or lack of interest in certain toys, games, and play activities and its attitude toward them. Playing with certain toys and games such as tea sets, white dolls, periwinkle, etc., and developing certain leisure time activities and hobbies such as collecting and classifying objects of various types, working with constructor units, building crystal sets, making model toys of varying complexity, etc., may often be viewed by the black child as activities which are white. Well, that's true as well. And that's why as you get older, you see, hold on, so called white people didn't really invent all these things. Well, our people mostly invented everything. They just kind of, shuffle along and then stamp the name on it. Thus, certain play and leisure time activities may take on certain social, cultural, ethnic flavors and may be rejected or accepted by the child depending on his personal needs and desires and those of his parents and peers. Often, games or activities which may involve reading, mathematical operations, sustained concentration, solitariness, and are actively discouraged by the child's peer group. They may be tagged as sissy games by the boys' age mates. Games that will facilitate parent-child interaction are usually less encouraged in the black community. Thus, this type of interaction, which can add measurably to the child's intellectual capacity, is often enough available to the black child. Games which involve parent-child participation also add markedly to the child's emotional stability, feelings of belongingness, and security. Often, the black child's leisure time activities do not follow an age-graded developmental sequence as far as would be acceptable. Its involvement in strictly physical activities and his relative lack of interest in hobbies, collecting, reading, etc. His relative lack of interest in cultural activities such as music, art, theater going, etc., and other activities which can continue into adulthood or which can lay the basis for adult leisure time activities and professional life may bring about discontinuities in his life which may cause adjustive problems in school and adult life. What kind of leisure time activities does the ghetto black child have to look forward to after he grows too old for stickball, tricycles, junk toys, and the like? All too often, he has only looked forward to boredom, restlessness, idleness, the overcoming of which leads to vandalism and various forms of juvenile delinquency, or to an imitation of easily observed adult forms of leisure time activities such as becoming intoxicated, gambling, running women, or bullying on the street corners for endless hours. Thus, the relative lack of transitional games which can be further elaborated in adult life, lay the basis for much of black adult maladjustment or involvement in activities which prove detrimental to black family and community life. It's key, man. It's key. Everybody want to feel like they're a part of something, So you want to feel like you belong. And then as you get older, influences get heavier. start to feel separate from your immediate household. If you're going in like public schools and things like that, or you're part of sports teams, you want to start being around, those peers more. That's why you have to be grounded. You have to be grounded. And then if the parents are ungrounded, again, he just said, once that basically once you hit that teenage age, they not really most teenagers not really at the park, sliding down slides anymore. So now you're gonna have to switch it up. Here, what did he say? Often the black child's leisure time activities do not follow an age grade developmental sequence as far as would be acceptable. His involvement in strictly physical activities and the relative lack of interest in hobbies, collecting, reading, etc., his relative lack of interest in cultural activities, such as music, art, theater, going, etc., and other activities which can continue into adulthood or which can lay the basis for adult leisure time activities in professional life, may bring about discontinuities in his life, which may cause adjusted problems in school and adult life. What kind of leisure time activities, as does the ghetto black child, have to look forward to after he grows to old for stickball, tricycles, junk toys, and the like? So once you're that age, culture is everything, right? Awareness is pivotal. Has to be merged. Has to give the children something to look forward to, something to appreciate. Other than what society tells you should appreciate, or even what other peers tell you should appreciate. You know, all too often he only has to look forward to boredom, restlessness, idleness, the overcoming of which leads to vandalism and various forms of juvenile delinquency, or to an imitation of easily observed adult forms of leisure time activities, such as becoming intoxicated, gambling, running women, or bullying on the street corners for endless hours. Parents, your job is real. Like, not the work you do to get paid in credits, what I mean, or in finance and funds, you know, but your investment that you can see from the fruit that you bear in the form of your child, your ROI, your return on investment will be determined by how productive that child becomes in society. Having a productive, aware, an uplifted child that grows into becoming a aware adult, striving to constantly become the greatest version of itself, or become the greatest version of itself, or realize it is the greatest version of itself. That's going to be your best ROI in life. Thus, the relative lack of transitional games which can be further elaborated in adult life, lay the basis for much of black maladjustment or involvement in activities which prove detrimental to black family and community life. Great movie. Uh, pull it up here. Cuba Gooding Jr. I believe it's called King. He was called King. But he's he's a performer. He's an ex-con. Steps in to substitute in a classroom of at-risk children. High school. They very pretty much labeled at risk. Life of a King. Okay. There's one right here. Great movie. See the knuckleheads right here. What society deem as knuckleheads. Even though they're geniuses, but it ain't cool to be a genius. And this is what Amos Wilson is pretty much saying. And things we already know, but it's just more extra. It's just extra emphasis on the factor that it has to change. It only leads to our demise, right? Thus, the relative lack of transitional games. Why not become a chess master? Why not embrace playing chess? Right? Use your mind instead of using your body all the time to get you certain outcomes. Save your body for your old your elderly age. Use that mind, keep it active. You'll age better by using your mind anyway. Most athletes' bodies are completely torn down. By the time that they're um, in that retirement age or that retirement round. Right. So yeah. Great movie to check out if you haven't checked it out. Perfect to what we're talking about. In reviewing the play preferences of the bright child on page 103 or 103, it becomes readily apparent that the social, cultural, and economic factors influential in large segments of the Black community operate against the Black child of average or above average intelligence. The overall interests and orientations brought about such communities, which are reflected in the interests and orientation of the children's play, work against the intellectual and pro-social development of their children. So yeah, you a nerd if you in talking about things that actually matter. Basically, to sum it all up. Reading the comics in the Black child. Generally, the comics are written and designed for the white child in America. They principally concern themselves with the white world, indicate only a tenuous concern with the Black world. While they may serve as a bridge to the white world and as a means for the Black child to vicariously assimilate the knowledge and values of that world, they may also help to bring about a rejection or create a lack of interest in his own world. The absence of his own cartoon heroes may leave him with the impression that his people are not heroic, that they are invisible and not worthy of depiction. I mean, I don't know if you all saw Reese. I think it was recently. Actually, let me pull it up. Matter of fact, they had. I think Disney faced a lot of flack for creating it, but it was I think it was a so-called black man to create it. To create the character. But obviously, the so-called black community was outraged because of this. But it's like, I mean, going back to that idea of what we deem to be racist. No, first it wasn't created by a European, but also, I mean, if you're going around, if you're an adult, if you're still wearing durags, and I mean, they got you got to find some way to capitalize off that and to get it approved, right? So you got durag man, can't get turban man, can't get fez man, because you know there's people that necessarily don't want you to embrace your culture. And then again, if you wear it's cool, it's better, it's cooler to wear a turban. I mean, a durag over a turban or a fez, right? So what if we stopped wearing durags and we started wearing turbans or fezzes, just to see an experiment to see? Because if this didn't exist, it wouldn't be able to be made. Now, I'm not here to talk down on durags. Obviously, I used to wear a durag in my younger days as well, but you know, part of fashion sometimes, and more so to help out with my waves. But yeah, I mean, just like you carry yourself a certain way, then that's going to be projected. So yeah, we want our own representation, but we also want it to be a beneficial representation as well. Don't just want our own representation to have it for the sake of it. The absence of his own cartoon heroes may leave him with the impression that his people are not heroic, that they are invisible and not worthy of depiction. Thus, while assimilating the myths of other groups, he alienates himself from his own and thereby begins a process of self alienation. And then, if you know the backstory behind most of the superheroes, I mean, they're all melanated originally. So it's like, again, and we know this is 1975, but again, I'm just going to combat these theories or these talking points that we took on um, without really embracing the solution. More often than not, the black child has an ambivalent attitude toward comics since he sees since he senses that the worlds of fantasy depicted them do not include him, and quite often abandons the reading of comics very early. And that's why I shout out to anime, because even if you don't want to read the comics, you got the animes that you can watch. But some form of reading, whether it's comics or thought provoking books, even entertaining books at times. And then you can pull some jewels from fiction books as well. Um, if we're talking imaginative here, you can learn from anything. You're still working that, exercising those muscles with thought. So um, the point is that you have to be striving towards something to uplift you. Um, while the danger exists that in reading the white comics, the black child may establish ultimately unhealthy identification, assimilate attitudes and feelings detrimental to his self-esteem and positive self-image, to not read them may also place him in danger of losing a good source of inspiration, information, and new ideas And as we just indicated, reduce his motivation to continue to read and develop his reading skills. Exactly. Comic book reading, like reading in general, count for too small a portion of the black child's growing activities. Through selected comics, the black child may begin to develop word skills beyond those offered by his restricted urban environment. However, the black parent must keep in mind that inimical aspects of the comic for a child, and that the uncritical acceptance of these books by the child opens them to the propagandistic influence and the schismic influences of these books that we alluded to at the beginning of this chapter. Because these books often do not enhance positive ethnic self-love and often work against it by consciously and unconsciously promulgating white values perceptions, the black child may unwittingly assimilate those values perceptions which are at odds with his own self-interest. And that's why the children know that, we at war. At the time that these things were going on, we pretty much lost the war, but now we've won the war again. That's why, yes, you can systems are falling. We're coming to our awareness, realizing things that we weren't supposed to realize. And the Prophet Noble Drew Ali said, once the wheels of industry stop spinning, no business will be able to be done except through the hands of the Moors, pretty much. So, I mean, these things are happening. But it's good to know, let the children know the context, as context is king. Yeah, this might be so-called white images, or films, TV shows, all this. You might not, the toys may not look like you, but why? Why is that happening? Obviously, it's designed to decrease your self-esteem. When the victors tell a story, or they have, the land, then they're going to do everything to their benefit, and to the ones that lost, detriment. That's just the rules of war. That's just how it goes. But we have to be willing to accept that. Right? And know that no matter how society is, individually, you're never a loser. Like these are things that happened before majority of us was even born. You're talking, 1500s. You know what I mean? For the actual war, or we could say 1492. You know what I mean, when things started to kick off. But yeah, 5492. Like the point is, those things are not really in our control until collectively we can make moves towards that. So you can help others as much as you can on a grand scale, but individually, it's a must that you take back your mind, your self-esteem, your awareness, your the love of self. You have to take all those things back, no matter what criticism you face from others or society. Who cares? Be God, and don't care who's going to stop you. All right. And it's not in a egoic sense, but it's from a place of, you got to be your own inspiration, motivation, um, discipline, fortitude. You have to be your own everything, so others around you can be their own everything. Then everyone can be their own everything, and we're all everything. But not anything. Everything, everywhere, all at once. But not anywhere, nowhere, at all. Yeah, it gets got a little nuance behind these things. Um, so yeah, it's pivotal for the parent to be able to install those um, seeds to combat the colonial occupation, so to speak. So, because these books often do not enhance positive ethnic self love and often work against it by consciously, unconsciously promulgating white values perception, the black child may unwittingly assimilate those values perceptions which are at odds with his own self interest. The relative sparsity of black comics, particularly comics which seek to accentuate the positives of black culture, leaves the black child open to unconsciously developing feelings of inferiority. One wonders if the black comics with their white heroes do not early begin to help instill a black dependency syndrome by implying through their stories and designs the white will always win. Only whites can be true heroes. Mastery of the universe is Whitey's destiny. White people can solve all problems. Let Whitey do it. Subconscious, I'm reading the book just so you know that. I don't agree to any of those ideologies or theories. I'm not accepting that in my reality. I'm reading this book. These aren't my words. You got to say that thing because our words can either make us or break us. So we got to make sure that the subconscious doesn't know what's real or fake. So we got to make sure that we're not creating worlds that we don't want to create. Utilizing white characters he has seen in the comics and more so on TV, the black child during fantasy and dramatic play may actually see himself as those characters and keep them constantly before his eyes as he plays and imagines. His imagination is not people about blacks like himself, while he holds sway over all he surveys. It is he as a white hero that dominates, rules, and conquers all. With this kind of imaginative play taking place in childhood, there is little wonder that many blacks find it very difficult to imagine themselves as being active masters and progressive shapers of destiny, and at the same time being fully black. A very large segment of blacks believe the world will fall into utter chaos and revert to the dark ages if the white man were not present. And again, what are the dark ages? What are the dark ages? Who was it dark for in that age? I'm already dark. So there's no such thing as a dark age for me. I am the dark age. Why incarnated? I came in to this society as a dark age. No, just kidding. But yeah, that's obviously when the Moors was ruling Europe, right? The Dark Ages. So knowing that, boom, get that ideology out of here. Get that concept out of here. Don't exist. One wonders how much the early fantasies of life of black children contribute to such a myth. Under the present circumstances, that thrills the black child garners from his imitations of white comic book characters and their TV counterparts are counterfeit at best. These imitations make it more and more difficult for him to separate his own reality and destiny from those of whites and simultaneously lay a foundation for a dependency ambivalent attitude towards whites and a rejective ambivalent attitude toward himself. Speaking of reading in general, the child's early reading experiences will markedly influence his latter reading behavior in terms of both quantity and quality of reading. Although a child has learned to read relatively well in early childhood, or more precisely, meaningful interest in reading, his reading behavior may be adversely affected by what reading materials are provided in his home. His familiar cultural attitudes toward reading, the attitudes of his peers and toward reading, the availability, adequacy, and utilization of the public or school library. Of major importance in this regard is the child's social culture and social economic background. The black child's reading activities are relatively unsupervised and under-encouraged when compared to the white child, as is the lower class child's when compared to the middle class and regardless of race. And again, I mean, we can do as much as guiding as we want to. Obviously, and in my opinion, how I see anything, Allah is the greatest of planners because I'll be honest with you. Let me go back. Go back to first grade. Okay. Second grade. Third grade. Fourth grade. Fifth grade. Sixth grade. Seventh grade. Eighth grade. Ninth grade. 10th grade. Start playing varsity. 11th grade. 12th grade. College. Freshman year. Sophomore year. Junior year. Senior year. Ah, there it is. But wait, senior year, no. Now, graduation. Ah, there it is. Now, I start reading for leisure. Look at that. So, yeah, outside of a book being assigned for like a homework assignment, reading for leisure, didn't do it. Didn't really start tapping into after I graduated. Wow. Start tapping a little bit. Then I went to go play arena ball for a short period of time. After that, really start tapping in even more. So yeah, I was already done with school before I actually started truly reading books for leisure. That's crazy. So again, it's in the DNA ultimately, but you would like to child your child to tap into that a little earlier on, so things get a little bit more be a little bit more stable for them. I had a lot of ups and downs, in which you're still going to have some ups and downs. That's life. But I just put myself in my daughter's shoes. She likes to read to me before she go to bed at times. She's 8. I didn't ever do anything like that to my mother or my granddad, my grandmother, like my uncles, my auntie. Like now, I would if we go to a museum or something like that, I would read the description sometimes out loud or something. But that's just, I mean, that again, that's not really leisure. It's kind of you do it to contextualize what's going on in that exhibit of the museum. So it's like eventually, if it's meant, what's meant for you will never miss you, and what misses you was never for you, obviously. So again, we can do all these strategies and things like that. We can guide our children the best way we think we can, and inshallah, it works. However, I mean, again, only time will tell. But I mean, if it's in your DNA, eventually it's going to unravel. And I mean, and it's in pretty much everyone's DNA to be. I mean, we're human. We're the highest. We're the greatest creation that there can be. So intelligence is our nature. You know, success is our nature. Happiness is our nature. So it's like it's just you don't want to do things that's going to keep you from living a stable life to have to find out that you're capable of more. That's all. That's what we really want to avoid. We don't want to. People don't want people to have to go to prison just to realize that they're intelligent. Like, just know that you're intelligent already, and then skip that step of having to go to prison. Like, yes, Malcolm X or El Haj Malik El Shabazz became enlightened, pretty much, through his trials and tribulations, and went to prison. But that's him. Don't take those steps just because he was able to overcome those obstacles. He did that, so you won't have to. He got out showing you, hey, there's another way. Knowledge of self. That's the ultimate realization. You don't have to take those steps to gain knowledge of self. It's available for you at any time. Don't be caught up in blissful ignorance. Take back the knowledge of yourself. Generally, the black child is not exposed to an adequate amount of age graded reading material. This is especially true for the black lower class child. That this child may have an adequate amount of story and picture books in early childhood, but an adequate amount of or an absence of books and reading materials appropriate for late childhood and early adolescence. The black condition and all it implies works against good reading habits in the black child. Moreover, this oral tradition existent in black culture in general and in lower class subculture in particular operates effectively against the acquisition and enjoyment of reading. The use of written record as a source of communication, culture transmission, information, learning, and enjoyment is of a relatively recent origin in much of African culture, especially West African culture, from where it originated the majority of American blacks. And again, this is from 1975, so I mean, if we're talking one landmass, okay, but I was born in America. I'm American, like so. The black slave experience, though it did teach a few of the blacks to read, did not lay a solid foundation for the establishment of a viable literary tradition among them. In fact, the African oral tradition was essentially continued and encouraged by the white society. Reading by a black was a punishable offense during slavery time and continued to be so for many years after slavery was abolished. Actually, until the very recent past, reading was not encouraged among blacks by the dominant white society and was all, albeit not by legal means, especially when such reading threatened to undermine the ideology of white supremacy, to encourage black independent thought and action, and to encourage blacks to throw off the yoke of white domination. For the sake of this type of conversation, growing up and reflecting on that today, if I had ever met a man that said he was locked up for reading a book, I will congratulate that brother right there on the spot. I'm like, yeah, you just became one of my heroes. The fact that you felt so strongly about reading that you were willing to accept those consequences of going to jail for reading that book. They say at one point we weren't able to read. Yeah, we can read now today, but punishment free. So I mean, that's the whole Pavlov's dog experiment. Look that up when you get a chance. The development of reading skills among blacks was encouraged by whites for what amounts to basically utilitarian purposes to serve the white man and his interests. Thus, blacks have been literally conditioned to avoid reading except when it is demanded of them, to not see reading as an exemplary source of enjoyment and as a major source of learning and communication power. Now, that I agree with. Outside the form of a textbook, not me, from my experience, myself alone, like I just told you, share with you all, basically into graduating college, which is you're going to school to learn. I don't even think I actually. Yeah, I didn't. I went to Winston State, even at Fayetteville State. So I went to two colleges, Fayetteville State University and then Winston State University. Transferred and graduated from. Yeah, I didn't even step foot in Fayetteville State University's library. Yeah, and Winston-Salem State University, O'Kelly Library. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely not for leisure. Get some extra homework done sometimes, reading for class, meeting someone, but assignments, but for leisure, just because I enjoy reading, did not miss a lot of the libraries, those college libraries. No matter what college it is, they hold a lot of jewels in there. State libraries, all those are pure jewels in there that you can find. But I think it's more of a divine thing for me. Although I didn't take those steps, I still reached the state I'm in today, in which the state I've always been. So I just say, I guess I realized that state. But I'm just, again, encouragement and things like that would obviously help more earlier on. The earlier of a thing, the better, if it's possible. But again, what's for you and never miss you. Thus, blacks have been literally conditioned to avoid reading except when it's demanded of them, to not see reading as an exemplary source of enjoyment and as a major source of learning, communication, and power. As we shall discuss in detail later on in this book, the largest source of information for blacks in the lower classes, information is carried by word of mouth, which is, word of mouth is actually if it takes more to remember that over time, as opposed to a book that you always have in your hand to go back to refer to. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with word of mouth. Sometimes you can become a slave of the mind by reading too much. Everything takes balance, because it really, if you can't sit with yourself as the self and enjoy it, that's the underlying issue there. Because then, if not, then you reading can be a form of escapism. It's a better form than obviously being intoxicated and anything else, but it still can be running from that which is already and always there, which is the self. Is because you tap into that, everything flows to you. Because all that we are is consciousness. Consciousness is infinite. So we all have infinite knowledge. Um, but being in the flesh, I highly doubt that we will tap into everything, you know. But it's just more so about the awareness of, you know, the self or yourself, in yourself as yourself. Wow, bro. A valuable black literary tradition was and is also effectively discouraged by employment discrimination and the slowness of the black social mobility. It takes no great insight on the part of the black child to realize that the unskilled and semi-labor which parents provide and which he will most likely provide in turn makes masterful reading a superfluous and frustrating activity. Even if the child had high aspirations, he more often does not realize that the relationship between the development of reading skills and the attainment of his aspirations. It goes without saying that in a society centered around a literary tradition, a person or group without such will suffer a serious disadvantage and is bound to be maladapted in such a society. Imagine the turn up being you and your friends or even your family, you get up to popcorn read. Imagine that's the turn up. Different society. This is the case with blacks in this country. In some, as a consequence of the black experience in America, the black parent does not adequately reward and demand the development of reading skills in their children. They are prone to see their teaching of reading skills as the responsibility of the schools and to underestimate the importance of their own influence in the development of these skills. Consequently, black children suffer from massive reading problems. Blacks in general, are, as in case with the large segments of American culture, also are anti-intellectual. This is particularly true of black lower classes and in a rather peculiar way of the black middle class. However, in the black ghetto culture, this anti-intellectualism is often the cause of the ridiculing of the black child who persists in reading, who shows a strong literary interest. Menace to society. Go on somewhere with that shit, Sharif. uh, Peer group pressure often negates these orientations early in the child's life. Persistent reading may be viewed by the black child peers and acting white, strange, a sign of queerness. Crazy. And may be viewed by the black child's peers um, as acting white, strange, and a sign of queerness. It may create in the ridicule child an identity problem and a problem of being accepted by his peer group. And opting for acceptance, it may be necessary for him to reject reading as a major activity and forego its benefits. These factors, along with others such as the fact that historically and currently the white society has been and is unenthusiastic, to say the least, about the development of literary tradition among blacks, has aided and abetted the oral orientation among blacks and retarded the development of reading skills in the black child. I mean, but even going back to here, this being published in the 70s, if you know you're at war, why would you expect the victor or the so-called oppressor to do anything for you? Why? Why? I mean, why would we even come from that perspective? Like we really, I'm so grateful to be alive this time period, man. Because yeah, what a time to be alive and to be aware. Because it's no more of this. It's over for that. That ideology of inferiority, yeah, get it out of here. I don't care what you're talking about. I don't care if you're a billionaire. It don't matter. You're not greater than me. I don't give a damn. and that should be for for all of us. Like no one is greater than anyone. We all we're all great in our own regards. All right. Movies, TV, radio, and the black child. Essentially the same psychodynamics which are apparent during the black child's comic book reading activities in its dramatic imitation of play when these activities and play relate to white images are apparent during its TV and movie watching activities. Here, these psychodynamics are maximally demonstrated due to the overwhelming influence of these media. Therefore, we would not belabor the point. The recent plethora of black movies have not been of much benefit to the black child in the sense of creating more positive psychodynamic effects which contribute to healthy personality growth. The same can be said of TV programs which feature blacks. This is mainly due to the fact that the same racist commercial interests which control white TV films and TV production also control black films and TV production. The racist message in both black and white visual entertainment gets through. However, the black film is more insidious than its white counterpart due to the fact that the black child in viewing such becomes even more uncritical and accepting of the racist hidden agendas. The vast majority of black films seek to exploit the sensationalism of negative ghetto existence and black bourgeoisie fantasies that soar far beyond reality. Thus, hustlers, pimps, drug pushers, criminals, and other solid characterizations crowd the screen that is presented to the mind of the black child. These characters are in a way glorified in the general dysfunctionality of black ghetto existence, elevated to a major art form. Seldom is the black child exposed to films which are concerned, which are serious and realistic expression of the black world, and which critically expose the negative factors of black existence. He is virtually not exposed to the black films which positively educates him, which teaches him how to cope with his problems in creative, realistic, and legitimate ways. A very substantial amount of the black child's time is spent listening to or overhearing radio whose constant fare is music. This radio listening is supplemented by the constant stereo playing of records, albums, and tapes by many parents. The music is usually played at deafening levels and may continue from early morning to late night. The romantic, erotic, and rhythmic, hypnotic nature of much of the music listened to by black children, almost without notice, reinforces attitudes and developing lifestyles centered around sensuality, mawkish sentimentalism, escapist dancing, and partying. Black rhythmic music, which serve the positive functions of catharsis, inspiration, entertainment, etc., during the dark days of slavery and during the heydays of Jim Crowism, have now virtually become as an opiate of a large segment of the black community. The music, along with the ever-present dancing, which accompanies it, serves as a means of diverting attention away from personal and community problems, as a means of escaping the ugly reality, as a social accepted form of fantasy life, as an ends in themselves. The chronic playing of such music reduces the ability to concentrate, and along with chronic TV watching reduces interest in reading and study. Hold on one more here. It's definitely time to break my fast. Ramadan Mubarak to those in or Ramadan Kareem to those in observance. Watching reduces interest in reading and study. We wish to make it clear here that it is not the nature of the music itself that is at fault, but the inability to control the listen to of music in the interests of more wholesome personality development that is a problem. The major problem with the black child play and leisure time activities as a whole, including TV and radio watching and listening, is the black child's inability to inhibit such activities so that other parts of his personality may be developed. The time allotted to such activities is so great that little, if any, time is left over for the development of reading, intellectual, creative, and problem-solving skills. Such activities become the end and be-all the child's and adult's existence. This turns out to be the case because the child is not taught how to delay pleasure and the interest of cognitive, personal, and pro-social development. The black child's continuous concern with hedonistic plays reflected in a large percentage of black adults' continuous concern with physical pleasures and partying. There are parallel and continuous activities. The greater part of the black adult's day consists of the following. 1. Work. Through a large segment, do not engage in this activity for various reasons. 2. Passing time and activities usually not of positive, personal, familial, communal, or educational value. Activities not geared to solution of personal, familial, or communal problems, or to self-improvement. And 3. Sleep. This is paralleled by the black child's day, which consists of the following. 1. School. for the school-age child. 2, passing time, which is not wrong in itself, but it's principally made up of activities which contain few elements of rehearsal for future reality, which lay the basis for future intellectual, personal, and pro-social growth. Time almost fully spent playing along purely hedonistic lines. And 3, sleep. Of course, these day activities vary according to class orientation, but are prevalent enough on all class levels to help maintain the personal, familial, and communal disorganization which characterize the largest segment of the Black community. Implications and recommendations. In this chapter, we have seen that play plays a very important part in the child's development. Child's play is a serious activity in the form it gives shapes to the child's more mature intellectual personality and social orientation. When continuous and congruent with the broader social context in which it takes place, play adds greatly to the child's future adjustment, both near and far. When discontinuous and incongruent with the broader social context, i.e., when it established cognitive behavior style which serves as a mechanism of escape from reality, then future adjustment will be marginal or outright dysfunctional. Their parent must take her child's play seriously. This does not mean that the heavy hand of adult supervision and purposefulness should direct the child's play activity. It means that the parent should be given an opportunity to play in a way that will meet his personal needs, thus eliminate his having to find substitute forms which will give him less satisfaction or which will be socially disapproved. 5, or lead to hedonistic play which becomes an end in itself and which ultimately stifles a child's intellectual, personal, and social maturation. To avoid this, we recommend the following. Enrich your child's play environment through making available a variety of toys, basic play material, and games. Buy or invent games that you and other family members can play with them. Present the child with games and toys that are interesting yet demand just slightly more of his intellect than he currently exhibits. See what kind of adult roles your child likes to imitate, and if positive, provide play materials, books, support, etc. related to that role. Take walks with your child in the park, to the beach, or other interesting areas, and help them collect and classify materials and he finds interesting if he feels so inclined. Discuss your child's fantasy characters with him if he initiates such discussion. Listen to his stories. They can give important clues to the direction of his personality development. The stories you tell can also have therapeutic and development of value for your child. Look through picture books with your child. Read stories to him. Show some sincere interest in the picture books, stories, and activities he brings to your attention. Teach your child how to inhibit play activities when told to do so or as a means of controlling impulsive behavior and of delaying gratification. Not let your child become addicted to purely physical hedonistic play. Place enough restrictions on such play so he can explore other areas of function such as reading, writing, creative thinking, etc. Involve your child in group and community activities and projects. Interest him in a broad variety of cultural activities, especially those of his own culture. Use your child's desire to read as a chance to teach him. Teaching of reading can begin as early as a child's second year. Note the possible danger of your child's schismic play. However, do not restrict your child's reading of white comics, seeing white movies and TVs and movies or his imitation of white just because they happen to be white. He will live in a white world and must finally adjust to it. If you follow our recommendations of the last 2 chapters and have helped to establish a sense of ethnic pride, self-love, self-confidence, and a strong ego in your child, then you need to have little fear of him becoming white or developing feelings of inferiority or self-hatred. All right, so the next chapter we're going to go to for the next book session will be The Black Child, Intellectual Development as Revealed by Standardized Tests. So that should be an intriguing chapter. All right, so solid session today. We'll be back for book session 6 eventually. And then we'll eventually wrap up this read and go to another one. All right. So Islam.